The burned-out German half-track sits like a metal gravestone beside the mountain road, its twisted steel frame collecting fresh snow that falls through the pine branches overhead. Private First Class Audie Murphy crouches behind what remains of a stone retaining wall, watching the white flakes settle on his rifle barrel while the distant rumble of tank engines echoes through the Vosges Mountains. The sound grows closer with each passing minute, and Murphy knows the German counterattack everyone predicted for 3 days is finally coming down this narrow road that cuts through the frozen hills of eastern France. Sergeant Harrison's voice crackles over the squad radio from the command post dug into the hillside 50 yards back. The words are clipped, professional, carrying the weight of orders that originated somewhere far from this particular patch of January 1945 mountainside, where Murphy and 7 other men wait in positions that feel more like graves than defensive lines. The plan, as Harrison explains it for the 3rd time this morning, remains straightforward. Hold this road junction until the main force can establish better positions on the ridge behind them. Delay the enemy advance. Buy time for the rest of 3rd Infantry Division to dig in properly. Murphy shifts his weight against the cold stone, feeling the way frozen ground bites through his wool overcoat and into his bones. The M1911 pistol in his shoulder holster carries 4 rounds, same as it did when he made that calm decision 3 hours ago to distribute most of his ammunition to Collins and the other riflemen whose positions cover the approaches from the north and east. Mathematics again. 8 Americans with limited ammunition facing what intelligence estimates as a reinforced German company moving with armor support through terrain that favors the attacker. Private Collins, still carrying that photograph of his girl from Ohio in his helmet liner, huddles behind a fallen pine tree 20 yards to Murphy's left. The kid's breath makes small white clouds in the mountain air, and Murphy can see him checking and rechecking his rifle bolt with the nervous precision of someone who understands exactly how few mistakes this kind of morning allows. Between them, the road curves downhill through stands of evergreen trees heavy with snow, disappearing around a bend where German voices grow steadily louder. The tank destroyer sits silent on the road's shoulder, its crew long gone, but its main gun still pointed downhill toward the sound of approaching engines. Murphy studies the vehicle's position, noting how its bulk could provide cover and how its abandoned deck-mounted machine gun might still hold ammunition. The half-track represents something more than disabled equipment now. It marks the spot where American and German forces have traded ground back and forth for weeks, leaving behind the debris of small, vicious encounters that rarely make it into division reports. When the first German infantry appear through the snow-laden pine branches, moving in loose formation along both sides of the road, Murphy feels that familiar calm settle over him like a blanket. The enemy soldiers advance with the careful confidence of men who believe they face a token, American rear guard, not a prepared position. Their mistake, but Murphy takes no satisfaction in tactical advantages when the numbers still favor the Germans 3-1, and their tank support has yet to show itself. The radio crackles again. Harrison's voice carries new urgency. German armor has been spotted on parallel roads, threatening to cut off the American withdrawal route if this position falls too quickly. The timeline just compressed from hold as long as possible to hold long enough for everyone else to get out. Murphy glances toward Collins, catching the younger soldier's eye and seeing his own understanding reflected there. They are not just buying time anymore. They are buying lives. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation. And stay with us for the next chapters. The first shot comes from Collins's position, a sharp crack that echoes off the mountainside and drops a German soldier who had advanced too far ahead of his squad. Murphy watches the enemy formation react with disciplined efficiency, spreading wider through the trees and returning fire that chips bark from the pine trunks and sends snow cascading from overloaded branches. The sound of Schmeisser submachine guns mixes with the deeper bark of American M1 rifles, creating a rhythm of violence that Murphy has learned to read like a language of survival. Corporal Williams, positioned behind a cluster of boulders on the right flank, calls out target information in the calm voice of a man who has done this before. German infantry moving through the tree line, working to flank the American positions from the east. A machine gun team setting up behind the disabled half-track, using its steel bulk for cover while they prepare to sweep the road junction with sustained fire. Murphy counts muzzle flashes, estimates numbers, and realizes the intelligence estimate was conservative. They face at least 30 enemy soldiers, not the squad-sized patrol headquarters expected. The tank destroyer becomes the focal point of the developing firefight. German soldiers use its burned hull for cover while advancing up the road, but its position also blocks their direct assault route and forces them into the tree lines where Collins and Williams can engage them effectively. Murphy studies the vehicle's deck-mounted machine gun, noting how its ammunition belt still feeds into the weapon's receiver. The crew abandoned it intact, probably under artillery fire that left no time for proper demolition procedures. Through his field glasses, Murphy spots movement farther down the mountain road, the dark bulk of German armor grinding uphill through snow that muffles engine noise but cannot hide the characteristic rumble of tank transmissions under load. Probably a Mark IV or two, maybe a self-propelled gun, providing close support for the infantry assault. The timeline compresses further as Murphy realizes their light weapons cannot stop armored vehicles in open ground. Sergeant Harrison's voice cuts through the rifle fire, calling Murphy back to the radio position. The orders have changed again. Higher command needs confirmation that this road remains impassable for German armor before they commit reserves to defending the ridge positions. Murphy acknowledges, understanding that confirmation means staying put until German tanks actually appear, not just retreating based on engine sounds and infantry contact. The moral mathematics shift with each radio message. 8 men in improvised positions cannot stop a reinforced enemy company with armor support, but they might delay the advance long enough for American artillery to register targets on this road junction. If they withdraw now, German tanks reach the main defensive line before friendly forces can properly prepare. If they stay, most of them will not see another sunrise, but the 3rd Infantry Division positions on the ridge might hold. Collins signals from his tree line position, German infantry working around the eastern flank, trying to get behind the American line. Murphy acknowledges with a hand gesture and checks his pistol again. 4 rounds, each one representing a choice between covering the withdrawal of his squad mates and preserving ammunition for his own survival. The tank destroyer's machine gun holds perhaps 50 rounds, enough to break up an infantry assault if someone can reach it and bring the weapon into action. The snow falls heavier now, reducing visibility but also concealing movement. Murphy uses the weather to relocate closer to the abandoned vehicle, studying its deck layout and noting how the machine gun's field of fire covers the main approach route. The German voices grow louder through the trees, confident commands in a language that sounds harsh against the mountain silence. They know they have trapped a small American force, but they do not yet understand what kind of fight they have chosen. The German machine gun opens fire from behind the half-track, raking the American positions with methodical bursts that send Collins scrambling deeper into the tree line and force Williams to press himself flat against the boulder cluster that provides his only cover. Murphy watches tracer rounds streak through the falling snow like angry fireflies, each burst walking closer to positions his men cannot abandon without exposing themselves to direct fire from the enemy infantry now advancing through the pines on both flanks. Radio static fills the air between rifle shots as reports flood in from adjacent positions along the Vosges mountain line. German attacks developing simultaneously across multiple road junctions, stretching American reserves and making it clear that this morning's action forms part of a larger enemy offensive designed to push 3rd Infantry Division off the ridge positions that control the valley approaches. Murphy listens to the tactical chatter while counting ammunition and measuring distances, understanding that no help will arrive for his isolated squad. Corporal Williams takes a hit, nothing fatal, but enough to knock him away from his rifle and leave blood on the snow beside his boulder shelter. The wound forces a redistribution of their already thin defensive line, with Collins shifting position to cover the gap while Murphy moves closer to the tank destroyer that dominates the road junction like a steel island in an increasingly violent storm. The machine gun on its deck represents their only chance of stopping the German infantry assault, but reaching it means crossing 20 yards of open ground under direct enemy observation. Private First Class Rodriguez, 19 years old and carrying a rosary wrapped around his rifle sling, calls out from the western slope where he has been watching for flanking movements through the forest. German soldiers working through the trees, using the heavy snowfall to mask their approach toward the radio position where Sergeant Harrison coordinates with higher command. The enemy understands American tactical doctrine. Eliminate command and communications first, then overwhelm the leaderless survivors with concentrated firepower. The moral weight of leadership settles on Murphy's shoulders like wet snow, as he realizes Harrison's position will be overrun within minutes unless someone creates enough noise and confusion to disrupt the German assault. 4 rounds in his pistol, perhaps 50 rounds in the tank destroyer's machine gun, against 30-plus enemy soldiers who have maneuvered into positions that make American withdrawal impossible without devastating losses. Through the snow and gunfire, Murphy hears the deeper rumble of approaching armor, German tanks grinding uphill through forest paths that American intelligence insisted could not support heavy vehicles. The timeline collapses completely as he understands their small, delaying action has bought all the time it can purchase through conventional defensive tactics. Someone must do something extraordinary, or the entire position collapses and takes the ridge defenses with it. Collins catches Murphy's eye from his tree-line position, and the unspoken communication passes between them like an electric current. The young soldier from Ohio understands what Murphy intends to do, even though the mathematics make no sense and the survival odds approach 0. A slight nod acknowledges the plan neither of them has voiced: create chaos at the tank destroyer while the others withdraw through whatever gap the confusion might create. The photograph in Collins's helmet liner shows a girl with dark hair and a smile that suggests she believes her soldier will come home to marry her after this war ends. Murphy wonders what promises he never made to anyone, what letters he never wrote, what futures he sacrificed when he chose to stay behind at Anzio, and again this morning in these frozen mountains where American and German forces trade lives for yards of meaningless ground. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. Murphy breaks cover as German infantry surge through the tree line toward Harrison's radio position, their field-grey uniforms ghosting between snow-heavy pine branches, while their weapons probe for targets among the scattered American positions. The 20 yards to the tank destroyer stretch like 20 miles under direct enemy observation, each step a negotiation between speed and the illusion of cover provided by falling snow that thickens with each passing minute in the Vosges mountain air. The first bullet from his M1911 takes down the German soldier manning the machine gun behind the half-track, causing the enemy weapon to fall silent at the crucial moment when Collins and Williams begin their withdrawal toward the ridge positions. Murphy reaches the tank destroyer's deck as return fire spatters against its armored hull, the metallic impacts creating a percussion that drowns out everything except the immediate tactical problem of bringing the deck-mounted machine gun into action against targets that seem to multiply with each passing second. The ammunition belt feeds smoothly into the weapon's receiver, and Murphy traverses the barrel toward the largest concentration of German infantry advancing through the eastern tree line. The first burst cuts through pine branches and enemy soldiers with equal efficiency, disrupting their assault formation and buying precious seconds for the American withdrawal. But the gun's muzzle flash also marks Murphy's position for every German weapon within sight, drawing fire that would normally force any sane soldier to seek cover immediately. Instead, Murphy keeps the machine gun in action, walking bursts across enemy positions, while German bullets fragment against the tank destroyer's armored surfaces and whine away into the forest. The tactical mathematics remain impossible. One man with limited ammunition cannot hold this position against an entire company. But mathematics do not account for the psychological impact of sustained fire from an unexpected direction at the moment when enemy soldiers expected easy victory. Through the gunfire and snow, Murphy glimpses Collins and Williams moving through the trees towards safety, their retreat covered by the chaos he has created at the road junction. Rodriguez follows, half carrying a wounded Harrison, whose radio still crackles with urgent messages from positions across the 3rd Infantry Division sector. The sight of his squad mates reaching cover transforms Murphy's desperate gamble into something approaching tactical success, at least for the next few minutes. The German armor arrives as Murphy's ammunition runs low. 2 Mark IV tanks grinding around the bend in the mountain road, their main guns traversing toward the tank destroyer that has become the focal point of American resistance. Enemy tank commanders have studied the situation and reached the logical conclusion: eliminate the machine gun position, then advance through scattered resistance toward objectives that matter more than this particular junction of frozen roads. Time slows as Murphy realizes the tank destroyer's position, which provided perfect fields of fire against infantry, also makes him an ideal target for direct fire from German main guns, at ranges where accuracy becomes academic. The first high-explosive shell impacts 50 yards away, showering the road with steel fragments and debris from shattered trees. Range adjustment for the next shot, which will arrive in seconds. Murphy abandons the machine gun as the second shell impacts directly against the tank destroyer's hull, the explosion lifting him from the deck and depositing him in deep snow beside the road, where he lies stunned but miraculously intact. German infantry resume their advance, believing the American position neutralized, but Murphy's brief stand at the machine gun has purchased enough time for his squad to reach safety and for American artillery observers to register targets on this road junction. The shells begin falling as Murphy crawls through snow toward the tree line, each impact walking closer to the German armor trapped on the narrow mountain road where tanks cannot maneuver and infantry cannot disperse. The position he defended so desperately becomes a killing ground for enemy forces, caught in the open by artillery fire, that arrives precisely because 8 American soldiers held their ground long enough for forward observers to do their work. The after-action report will describe Murphy's defense of the road junction in clean official language that transforms chaos into tactical clarity and reduces complex moral choices to straightforward military achievement. But the report cannot capture what Murphy remembers most clearly from those minutes at the machine gun. Not heroism or courage, but a profound loneliness that settled over him like winter fog as he realized he would probably die alone on that tank destroyer deck while his friends escaped through the forest. 20 minutes after the German shells stopped falling on the road junction, Murphy sits in an aid station carved into the hillside behind the ridge positions, accepting coffee that tastes like melted snow and diesel fuel, while a medic examines cuts on his hands from fragments of exploded steel. The wounds are superficial, but the medic works with the careful attention of someone who has seen too many soldiers who appeared uninjured until shock wore off and revealed damage that adrenaline had temporarily masked. Collins finds Murphy at the aid station, carrying news that Williams will recover from his shoulder wound and that Harrison's radio equipment survived the withdrawal intact, maintaining communications with division headquarters throughout the German assault on the ridge positions. The young soldier from Ohio tries to find words for what he witnessed at the tank destroyer, but language fails him, the way it fails most combat veterans when they attempt to explain extraordinary actions performed by ordinary men under impossible circumstances. The secret Murphy carries from those minutes at the machine gun has nothing to do with tactical heroics and everything to do with fear that nearly paralyzed him when German tanks appeared around the bend in the mountain road. For 30 seconds that felt like hours, he crouched behind the tank destroyer's armor plating and considered running, not toward his friends, but away from them, deep into the Vosges mountain forests, where a man might survive the war by avoiding every moral choice that required him to risk death for abstractions like duty and brotherhood. What kept him at the machine gun was not courage, but shame at the possibility that Collins might see him abandon the position after everyone else had trusted his plan enough to risk their own withdrawal on his ability to cover them. The medal they will eventually pin on his chest grows from 30 seconds of private cowardice transformed into public heroism by the simple expedient of choosing shame over survival when those appeared to be the only options available. Sergeant Harrison joins them at the aid station, his radio finally silent after hours of constant communication with artillery observers and division headquarters. The tactical picture has stabilized across the Vosges mountain sector. German attacks repulsed at most positions, enemy armor destroyed or withdrawn, American lines intact but reduced by casualties that will be listed in morning reports as light to moderate, depending on how headquarters chooses to calculate acceptable losses. The conversation among the 4 survivors focuses on practical matters, resupply schedules, replacement personnel, and the probability that German forces will renew their offensive within 48 hours using different routes through the mountains. Nobody mentions the tank destroyer or discusses Murphy's actions at the machine gun. Combat veterans understand that some subjects require years of distance before they become suitable topics for analysis or storytelling. But Murphy catches Collins, looking at him with an expression that combines respect and something approaching fear, the recognition that he has witnessed capabilities that extend beyond normal human limitations into territory that makes him uncomfortable. The same look appears on Harrison's face when he thinks Murphy is not observing him, and Murphy realizes his reputation has crossed an invisible threshold that separates admired soldiers from legendary ones who carry expectations that become heavier than any equipment. 3 weeks after the action at the road junction, Murphy receives a letter from his mother in Texas that contains no mention of medals or newspaper articles about her son's latest citation for extraordinary heroism in combat operations throughout the European theater. Instead, she writes about cotton prices and weather patterns and neighbors whose sons have returned home with wounds that heal faster than the silence that follows them through familiar rooms where nothing has changed except their ability to feel comfortable in spaces that once felt safe. The citation accompanying Murphy's Silver Star describes his conspicuous gallantry and intrepid leadership while defending a vital road junction against superior enemy forces, resulting in the destruction of enemy armor and the preservation of friendly positions essential to the successful defense of the sector. The language transforms his 30 seconds of private terror into public inspiration, creating a version of events that serves military morale and national mythology better than truth serves anyone except the men who lived through that January morning. Collins ships home in February 1945 with $1 million wound that damages his shoulder enough to end his combat service, but leaves him intact enough to marry the girl whose photograph survived every firefight in his helmet liner. Before departing for the aid station that begins his journey back to Ohio, he shakes Murphy's hand and attempts to express gratitude for covering his withdrawal from positions that should have been everyone's grave. The words emerge incorrectly, and both men settle for silence that acknowledges debts that cannot be calculated or repaid. Years later, in a Texas farmhouse where Murphy attempts to build a life that makes sense after winning more medals than any soldier in American history, the smell of diesel fuel on a cold morning will instantly transport him back to that tank destroyer deck where he learned the difference between courage and reputation. The flashback arrives without warning, triggered by sensory details that his nervous system catalogued during those minutes when death seemed both inevitable and acceptable. The German tank commander who fired on Murphy's position also survived the war, returning to a village near Stuttgart where he works as a mechanic and tries to forget the faces of American soldiers he killed during 4 years of combat across Europe and North Africa. Neither man knows the other's name or carries personal animosity toward enemies who fought with professional competence under political circumstances that exceeded their individual control or responsibility. The tank destroyer rusts beside the Vosges mountain road for 18 months after the war ends, gradually disappearing under vegetation that erases physical evidence of battles that seemed monumentally important to the men who fought them. Local French farmers eventually salvage its steel for more peaceful purposes, but they leave its machine gun mount intact as an informal memorial to violence that passed through their mountains like a summer storm, devastating but temporary. Murphy's final official combat action occurs in Germany during the closing weeks of European operations. But his private war continues in nightmares and sudden awakening, and moments when civilian life feels more dangerous than enemy fire because it offers too much time for memory and insufficient structure for managing guilt that follows survival when others did not survive. The contradiction between public hero and private veteran becomes a puzzle he spends decades attempting to solve. If this story reminded you that behind every medal there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.